All right, hey folks, we are going to dig into this next lesson here, some more music theory, and we are going to be talking about accidentals one more time, but this is going to be part two of that lesson where we're going to learn a little bit more about them and be able to label the keys on the keyboard and everything like that. So let's dig in. So for review here, from last lesson, we should have remembered that an accidental is a symbol that raises or lowers a pitch by a half or whole step. Now, we did say that there were five total types of accidentals, but the three basic types that we're working on right now are the sharp, the flat, and the natural. So we do want to make sure we remember those three basic types. So to review again, a whole step is going to refer to the progression between two consecutive pitches on the musical alphabet. So, for example, that means we're moving from C to D or G to A, things like that. Now, there are a couple of letters that change that are not whole steps. We did go over that last time. We did talk about that. We're going to review that in just a moment here as well. So, since they are not whole steps, they would end up being half steps. And the half step is referring to the progression between a letter name and its corresponding sharp or flat pitch. Now, obviously, you're going to see that natural is part of this as well. And that's because you can move from half step from an accidental back to its natural. We'll discuss that a little bit further in just a moment. So, for example, with this one, it would be C going up to C sharp, or B going down to B flat, and the same thing with A flat moving up to A natural, because remember, we have a flat pitch that returns to natural and has to raise that pitch up a little bit to bring it back to natural. So, talking about the three main types of accidentals that we usually run into, the sharp is an accidental that raises a pitch by half a step. The symbol right there looks like it might be a little bit pointy. So the way you can remember that a sharp raises a pitch is if you were to step on that symbol. You probably would not really enjoy that all that much, and you would probably end up picking your foot up to get it off of the sharp thing that you just stepped on. So that means that it's going to raise the pitch. The flat is going to lower the pitch by a half a step. The flat symbol right there looks like it's a B that's kind of sagging a little bit. So we can remember that, or like you can think about getting a flat tire, for example. Hopefully it doesn't happen to you, but you can at least remember that a flat tire goes lower. There's not enough air in it, so it's too low. So the flat is going to take the symbol lower. So I should say flat right there, folks. Sorry, there's a little mistake there. That's okay. And last but not least, a natural is going to cancel a sharp or flat and return the pitch to its original tone. So, like it says there, a natural sometimes raises a pitch and other times lowers a pitch. So, with that, if you are going from a flat note to a natural note, the pitch is going to raise because the flat note is lower. And when you raise it up to natural, it goes a little bit higher, back to its normal pitch. Now, on the other side of that, if you are going from a sharp note to a natural note, it's going to lower the pitch. So a natural is a really unique accidental, and it can do two different things at the same time. But mainly its function is to cancel the sharp or flat and return the pitch to its original tone. So the natural symbol does look like that. It's that kind of L7 sort of symbol right there that you see at the bottom of your screen. That's our natural symbol. So we're going to look at the whole steps on the keyboard as we had done before. So remember, whole steps are going to be when you change letters with another key in between. Let me turn on my laser pointer here. So for example, you're going from C to D, and you notice that there's that black key right there. That is our whole step from C to D because there's another one, that half step, in between. So you always want to look for the half step that goes in between to create the whole step. So C to D, D to E, F up to G, G to A, and A to B. Now, remember, E to F does change letters. However, there is no half step between those. It's very similar to B to C. There is no half step there. So those are not whole steps, even though they change letters. It's a general rule. There are some exceptions to it, so we just have to remember that. Okay? So half steps on the keyboard, like it says here, are those B to C or E to F because there is no black key between those. Those are the half steps that exist in those white keys right there. So now, remember, each of those black keys is a half a step, which is what we're going to discuss next. So when we label the black keys on the keyboard, each black key is going to get two different names. So this is a term called enharmonics. So what enharmonic means is two pitches that sound the same. So when you play the key, it's going to come out to the same sound. However, it's going to be named differently. And we're going to discuss that in just a moment here on these next slides. All right. So let's go ahead and continue on here and see what this is all about. The enharmonic tones may sound the same, but they function differently. So that's why we have to have those two different names. Each black key is going to have both a sharp and a flat pitch that is associated with it. And the pitches are going to be determined by the key that is on either side of the black key that's in question. All right, so let's work on doing an example of this here. So when moving left to right, so left to right, we are typically going to use the lower pitch along with a sharp symbol to label the key. So if we're starting on C right here, and we want to find out what this black key is, we're going to take the letter name of C and we're going to attach to that key. But we are also going to call that sharp because it does have to go up a half a step. We do this because the pitches are ascending, which means to get higher. So sharps, since they raise pitches by half a step, are used when we're going from left to right and ascending because it makes the most sense to raise a pitch as we are going higher on the keyboard. So for example, we take C and we make it C sharp. D right there becomes D sharp for that black key. F up to F sharp, G to G sharp, and A to A sharp. Now, if you are a piano player or you've taken piano or guitar lessons or something, there's a couple of these pitches that we don't always hear. A sharp, for example, or D sharp, for example. Now, they are notes that we use a lot of times, actually. However, there are some that are more common in certain situations. So if you're thinking, well, I know what this key is and it's not called A sharp, just wait a moment because we will discuss the other name, the enharmonic name for that key. Okay? So the big thing to remember with this, when you're naming the sharp keys going from left to right, moving higher, we are going to use the lower pitch, so the one that's on the left-hand side, along with the symbol for sharp. So C becomes C sharp, like it says there. Okay? So now, if we are going to move the opposite direction and go from right to left, we are going to use the name of the higher pitch. So the name becomes the same letter as the higher pitch, but we're going to use the flat symbol. Now, you can probably already figure out why this is, because as we move this direction, we are going to be moving lower. So when we move from right to left, the pitches are descending, which means to go lower. So what we're going to end up with is the higher letter name along with a flat. So for example, B to B flat, A to A flat, G to G flat, E to E flat, D to D flat. Now again, if you are a piano or guitar player, G flat or D flat might look a little bit weird to you. And that's okay. They are functional in certain situations. So just remember, as we are moving from right to left, meaning we are descending, we're going to use the higher letter name along with the flat symbol. So now remember, the pitch is determined by its placement on the staff. So even though the tones are enharmonic, we do have certain ones that sometimes move different ways. So like we're moving higher on the staff. We've already established that usually we're going to use the C to C sharp. However, it is possible to move from a C to a D flat if the music calls for it. Just like we can come down from G to G flat or G to F sharp. It really depends on what the music that you are reading is telling you to do. Okay? So, yes, there are rules that we usually do, but the important thing to remember is that it's all based on the written music. It is all based on what the actual composer of that music wants you to do. Okay? So, let's take a look at this next part right here. And when we put the accidentals on the staff, we're going to line it up with where this is. We're going to assume that this is middle C right here. Okay? Now, please remember, the staff repeats over and over again. So we could start C on that third space and continue up to that really high B above the staff. That's fine. The order of the keys on the keyboard stays the same as well. However, the majority of the time when we are using instruments or singing or whatever else, like we do during class or at school or whatever, we are going to use this general range from middle C to kind of that high B right there on the middle of the staff. You will get the C and the D above it, but most of the time you are going to stick within this range just because the instruments that we play are usually built in that register. Not to mention your voices are usually right around there. So we keep within this range to make things easier for you because your voices haven't developed to be able to sing those really low notes or up to those really high notes and things like that. So if you're looking right here, take a look. So we do have both the sharp and flat letters labeled on this right now. However, since we are looking at this going from left to right, we are looking at those sharp notes just to show you what they all kind of look like on the staff. So if you're looking here, you've got your middle C going to middle C right there. Now, as you move up to C sharp, you go to the black key that is right there, that half step between the two. D is at the bottom of the staff, like we learned before from downstairs. When we go to D sharp, we would go to the black key right there. Now, I know you're saying, well, why can't we call it E flat? Because the music says D sharp. Same thing with the C sharp here and any of the other accidentals that we see. So, like I said before, it's all about the music. It's what the composer wants. Composers are strange people. They know exactly what they want, and they will tell you very specifically what they want. Okay? So as we move up to the E right here, that's our normal everyday first line E. And this right here is an interesting one because it's already a half step, the E to F. Because there is no black key here between the two of them on the keyboard, there is a natural half step written right there. So that's your next half step. So that's why we're still moving chromatically, which means to move by half step. When we go from F up to F sharp, there it is. We've got our F sharp on the first spot. Remember, the accidental comes before the pitch and after the letter. Moving up to G, then G sharp, A sharp, again, right there, and then our B. Now, like I said before, we could repeat this. We could continue higher, and we could have our next C, C sharp, D sharp, etc. For the sake of doing this right now, we only really need to work on one octave because we can all understand that the octaves repeat. The keyboard is going to look exactly the same depending on where you are on the actual keyboard itself. Depends on how high the pitch is going to be. The same thing happens with the notes on the staff. Now, obviously, if we start on that C right there, it's going to be a higher pitch, but it's still a C, just like the next one would still be a C sharp on that same space, things like that. All right? So when we look at flats, the way that we're doing flats right now, normally speaking, you would want to kind of descend to play flats. But like I said, it's all about what the music says. So for example, if this one was written like this, now I did simplify this. There are some natural symbols that technically should be in here, but I simplified this for us so we don't have a lot of things to look at. So the C right there would move up to the D flat. Now, even though it's a flat note, it is still higher than C. If you look at that, there's that visual right there. It's higher than C, but it is lower than D. Now, this looks a little bit odd because it's D and D flat to D right there. But you can tell that it's a normal everyday D because there's no symbol next to it. Now, like I mentioned, I simplified this. In normal, everyday, real music that you would kind of see on, sheet music or what have you, you would see a D natural. You would see an actual natural symbol right there. But to hopefully not confuse anybody, I decided to take those natural symbols out just to give you an idea of what it looks like going from the flat note to the natural note. So it's the same idea. E flat would be the one right there. We would still have our natural half step between E and F. That doesn't change. There's your G flat, your A flat, and finally your B flat. Okay? So, like I said, if you are a piano player or a guitar player or something, sometimes that G flat and the D flat look a little bit odd to you, but that's okay because, like I said, depending on the context, we need those notes to exist. Okay? So let's recap here a little bit, folks. Each black key on the keyboard gets two names, a sharp name and a flat name. Okay? And that is because even though they sound the same and are named differently, they are enharmonic. So try to remember that big fancy word, enharmonic. So like I said, it gets a sharp and a flat pitch. The pitches are determined by the key on either side of the black key, the pitch that's on either side of the black key. So when moving from left to right, you are going to end up using the lower pitch along with a sharp most of the time. Same thing happens when you reverse that. When you go from right to left, you are going to use the higher pitch and the flat symbol most of the time. So remember, the pitch is always determined by its placement on the staff. We only ever use what the actual music shows us. So if it shows you a G flat, you still hit that same key that the F sharp is on, but you think of it as E flat or G flat, excuse me. Okay? So just be very clear on that. We don't call it by a different name if we can avoid it because we want to use the right names. Just like when someone speaks to you or to me or whoever, we want to use the correct names. Okay? So always remember that it is determined by its placement on the staff. Okay? So that's about it for the video portion of our lesson. We're going to get a little bit of practice doing this for real here and kind of just identifying some different keys and pitches and things like that. So we will get on with that and see how we do. All right, so let's go ahead and head over to back to your lesson, and let's work on some of those questions, those self-check questions that I have.